Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this July 27th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can catch my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Time. They also play the show at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, and if you can't get those two shows, go to my long-standing website called ARCTICBEACON.com, ArcticBeacon.com, going back 10 years or more regarding the subject of the Vatican-led New World Order. Okay, this is part 5 of a series I'm doing on the Tony Alamo Ministry and why Tony Alamo, the minister, sits in jail for 175 years. He was framed, and I think I've presented a good case over the years that he doesn't belong there. The 5 shows are, and this being the last one, are meant to be put together. Some people are doing a big YouTube and meant to be passed around to a whole bunch of people who are trying to get Tony released. And it's going to be a daunting task, but I think it can be done. Here's the point. The man's going to be 82 years old in September. He's already been in jail. This time, the second time they framed him. First time was for illegal, well, they said he violated IRS charges, but as you look back to some of my old shows on my website, you will see that they framed him in that as well. He didn't even, they stole his books, then basically didn't give him a chance to defend himself. And this was even proven. Amazing. So he spent 4 years in jail for that, came out stronger. And to me, when I looked at this, and I've seen Vatican persecutions before on ministers and other people. For example, with Tupper Saucy, what they did was the same thing. I have bogus IRS charges. Tupper decided to go on the lam, and you can get his story also on my website. They finally caught up with him, and he spent, a year and a half in jail on a misdemeanor. In fact, his prosecutor was a Jesuit priest. And you know Tupper is famous for writing the book, The Rulers of Evil, which pinned the Vatican with basically a lot of the things we talk about in this show and more. So I think what that was a warning to Tony. Look, you spent 4 years in jail, you shut up, you don't talk about us, we'll leave you alone. But Tony came out even stronger and continued. And so then they tried to basically find a way to put him away. And they did. It is a travesty of justice. They used the legal system to their advantage. The court was worse than a kangaroo court. I've gone over specifically many irregularities in that trial. And today I just wanted to go over them again and imprint on your mind how important it is that if it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody. And the point is, he sits in jail for 175 years. Now, how did they get him there, even though he doesn't belong there, even though he didn't commit these crimes they said he did? And how they did was very simple. They used informants who were trying to basically first they used informants trying basically to find some dirt on him, or to get, like one said, John Peeler said to me, we were going to try to get them to buy guns. We were going to try to get them to buy drugs. We were going to do everything we could, but he was squeaky clean and we couldn't. Peeler ended up telling his whole story on my show. He should have been allowed to speak at the trial, which would have basically exonerated Alamo immediately, but they didn't allow him to testify. First of all, the trial shouldn't have been held in Falk, Arkansas anyway. If you know that town and you know the makeup of that town, that he could not get a fair trial there. It's a small town, and the media had made him out to be something he wasn't. They'd made him out to look like Charles Manson or something, and he wasn't at all. Now, basically, they used what is called the Mann Act. Now, many of you probably don't know what that is, and let me just refresh your memory. It is an archaic law, still on the books, passed in 1910. It's known as the White Slave Traffic Act, and it's at 18 U.S.C. 2421 to 2424. That's where it sits. That's the law. It was named after Congressman James Robert Mann of Illinois. And wait till you hear some of this stuff. Now, why did they use the Mann Act? Now, they claimed he was a child abuser. They claimed he took girls and had, some kind of sexual activity with them. Now, if that was true, they could have used the child abuse statutes. They could have used rape. They could have used all of these statutes, which clearly would be the way to do it if he actually did it. But they couldn't, because he did not do these things. He wasn't given a chance to even prove, to state his case. So what they did is they used the Mann Act. Now, when you look at this archaic law, you're going to have to look at something here that's really, I'm going to go over some of the convictions and some of the acquittals on this law. And basically, even the New York Times said this. It said in 1915, the paper published an editorial pointing out how the act led to extortion. In 1916, it labeled the Mann Act the Blackmail Act, noting that its dangers had been clear from the start. The act made a harmless spree of simple elopement a crime, and the blackmail that resulted from the Mann Act was worse than the prostitution it sought to suppress. Now, what I'm trying to get at is one of the biggest elements of the Mann Act. Supposedly, you can be found guilty of this if you take girls across state lines for sexual purposes. Okay? There was an amendment made to that. Okay, in 78. Now here's the deal. Shouldn't you have to prove that sexual activity actually occurred? Illegal sexual activity? Well, like they said, there were 4 or 5 minors who testified, women who testified against Tony. And the interesting thing about that testimony was that many of them recanted their testimony afterwards. That was not even taken into consideration in his appeal. And when you see how they were bribed, how they were taken to a place called Wellspring, promised gifts, they were coached to basically say that Tony's intentions. Now, how did he cross state lines? Now, the original reason for this law was to prevent human trafficking, to prevent prostitution. But it was used in so many different ways that were ridiculous. You're going to see in some of the people that were charged with this crime, some that were convicted, others that the charges were dropped, including Jack Johnson, the boxer, Chuck Berry, remember Chuck Berry. Even Charles Manson was charged with this, and the charges were dropped. Now, wait, I'll get into that. But here's the deal. So, actually, during this trial, and I'm going to go over some of the irregularities in the trial after we finish a little bit more here on the Mann Act to show you why they used it, because they didn't have any evidence he ever did commit any child abuse. That never was even, they could even prove that in court. In fact, the jury came back. This was so striking. I've never heard this, really. I mean, I went to law school, and I'm going, what is going on here? But the jury came back when they were deliberating. And by the way, it was a short 10-day trial. The guy's in jail for 175 years. I've seen people that stolen a box of candy get a longer trial. It was a sham from the beginning. He was convicted in the media, like I told you. Read all those stories that they wrote about him. And then I find out they're not true because I looked into it. Now, what happens is the jury, they go out, they deliberate, and if they have questions, they're allowed to ask the judge to be clear, to be more clear, to basically explain what you meant by your jury instructions, Your Honor. So they came back and they said, Your Honor, can we convict him even if we can't prove or there wasn't any child abuse ever proven? The judge, he didn't want to say yes. Because he would have I mean, what judge would say? He just said, you just follow my instructions. He didn't clarify it. He didn't clarify it. Now listen to what they asked. can we convict a man under this act even if child abuse wasn't found? Well, a normal person or a judge that was fair would have said no. I mean, there was no child abuse. You know what? Like I said, this act was started to stop white slave trafficking in 1910. You should see all the crazy ways it's been used. It's used to frame people. It's used to discredit people who may be political opponents. They even brought charges against Charlie Chaplin because he was outspoken, on some of his views at the time against the United States of America. So they use this sometimes when they don't have positive evidence or any evidence that any kind of abuse was found. Now listen to what happens. So the jury goes back, and they figured, well, I guess the judge meant yes. So they find him, they convict him. Plus, it wasn't a very fair jury. If you know that town, for example, in that town, it's very small, and they were made out to be like Charles, like a cult, when they weren't a cult. Excuse me. And so right after this whole thing went down in 2008, I called. We had like 3 or 4 people. I got a few people to help me. Let's call the businesses let's call all over in Falk, Arkansas, and see what they think. We called, 30, 40 people. All of them said the same thing. Oh, this ministry is terrible. They're so secretive. You know what they were doing? They were repeating everything that the newspapers had said or the TV station said. So how can you get a fair trial there? That's something who the heck was his attorney? In fact, when you read my commutation, which I did on the first day of the first part of this, go back to part 1, he states that his attorney even said, we'll be tarred and feathered if we try to give you a fair trial. I mean, what is that? So anyway, they used the Mann Act because they didn't have any evidence. If they did, they could have used straight rape charges or anything, any straight child abuse charges that are on the books. But they knew if they did that, they had no way to prove it. So they used this archaic law, which basically has been used very sparingly over the years. And let me just go over some of they have a list here. Now, in fact, there were 3 people. There was one guy in 2010, 2002, another guy in 12, and Tony in 2008. Now, he has got the biggest sentence of anybody. 175 years. And let me make it a point here. I'm going to read some of the very prominent people you may know, and 2 people you may not know. Now, there was a preacher who basically admitted to having sex with a 16-year-old girl. Admitted to it. They could prove it. All right? And he was sentenced to 12 years. Now, they never proved anything in Tony's case, and he got 175 years. Okay? And that man was Jack Schaap, 2012. Now look at some of the people they've charged with this. And remember some of the criticisms. They used it sometimes. Back then, it was used, let's say a guy was having an affair with someone. And he lived in Chicago, and he traveled with her to a motel in Indiana. There have been wives who used the Mann Act against their husband for consensual sex. I mean, all right, you don't condone that kind of stuff, but should a guy go to jail for that for 175 years? See, Tony didn't do anything. He was taking his ministry and all the people in the ministry in a bus, and they had churches all across state. They had churches in California, some in New York. They had one in Texas, or in Arkansas. And the purpose was a prayer meeting. A purpose was to go pass out literature. A purpose was not to traffic or to white slave trafficking girls. That's obvious. Now, look at this. In 1962, Chuck Berry was sentenced to 3 years in prison for this as well. Now, he was convicted. I don't know the real facts in the case, but they used it against him. Now, Charlie Chaplin, he was acquitted, and they used the Mann Act, and he met some woman by the name of Joan Barry, age 24. He signed her to a $75 a week contract for a film he was putting together, and she became his mistress. By the summer of '42, Chaplin let her contract expire. To send her home, Chaplin paid her train fare to New York, which led to his arrest. Now, he was acquitted. Okay? 24-year-old woman. They didn't like Charlie Chaplin. Then they used it against Jack Johnson. And he said that, it is even generally acknowledged that the arrests were racially motivated. And a presidential pardon was asked for in 2009. Not sure if that happened. Now, Charles Manson was charged with this. Now, he took 2 prostitutes from California to New Mexico to work, but the charges were dropped. Now, that doesn't seem right, does it? Frank Lloyd Wright, remember the architect, famous architect? Charges dropped. They were trying to get at him, and he was crossing state lines with a consent, with a woman that was not a minor. Okay, so you can see how they can use this. And to me, if I was the prosecutor, and I know how this works, he understood he could never get a conviction because nothing happened. But if they manipulated the trial, if they manipulated the witnesses, if they basically did all these things, they might be able to get one. And they did. Now, there were not many convictions, not many people charged since 1910 that are on the record. I'm not sure. They probably don't have all the statistics from all the states, but it's a crazy law used for for political purposes, and that's what they did with him, with Tony. So that's one reason why I think people ought to look at it. And after looking at all the facts, I'm saying I've never seen a guy get railroaded more. I mean, this is a huge story, and nobody covers it. Now, I got a few minutes here. We might as well start. Well, listen, I'm going to go to some of the irregularities in his trial, and let me do that in the second half hour. But let me emphasize one thing here. There is more at stake here, and I tried to point that out throughout the week. And really what it is it shows me there is absolutely no freedom of speech in this country, and freedom of religion. The Johnson Act that Johnson passed, our famous Lyndon B. Johnson, that really put a damper on a lot of free speech amongst our pastors, because what Johnson did, he had a few people in Texas, few ministers in Texas during the 60s that were talking against him. So he figured out a way to shut him up, and what he did is he passed the Johnson Act, and he tied the speech, he tied the money given by the government to these churches under 501c3 company, corporations and other nonprofits. And basically, it was kind of like a gag order. You talk against the government, we're going to cut your money off. So many pastors realize that, and they don't say the truth. Now, interesting enough, Donald Trump, in one of his speeches recently, said he's going to get rid of that so that people can speak up, so people can talk. So maybe somebody, one of the things, and I want to mention this about Trump. I told you I've been following this presidential election very closely because I think it's one of the most important we're going to ever see. And many of you will, like me, hold no hope out because perhaps both sides are tainted, right? Like we call it the Hegelian dialectic. But in this case, you have to look at it a little differently. Now we know, and I'm going to do this tomorrow, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on giving you the specifics about Clinton and Trump and the differences. But one thing I want to say, that this time, I really think Trump would help. And what I mean is, he'll give us more time. I think it's inevitable that the New World Order has a plan and we're going to fall to it. But Trump would be a stumbling block if what he says he would do, he does. Now, many of you will say he won't. I'm going to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because what other hope do we have? And secondly, if he would drop the Johnson Act, maybe he would look at these cases of persecution of ministers, and I can name several others, and maybe he would have an open ear, because Clinton won't. Bill Clinton was one of the guys that wanted to bring Tony Alamo down in the first place. Now, I'm not going to get into that today, but anyway, I just wanted to point out he said he would get rid of the Johnson Amendment. Okay, so what we have here is a situation where we know, as well as I do, that the Jesuits have infiltrated Protestantism in this country. You can't find many places that preach the Bible, speak against the Vatican in the book of Revelations as being the whore, the beast, the whore, as being the Antichrist organization, as pointing out, it's clear. That's the way the Protestant reformers talked. This doesn't happen anymore. In fact, you go to these New Age churches, Christian churches as they call themselves, and you see them giving the 666 sign with their hands at the end of their little speeches. It's incredible, but that's their little sign that they're playing ball with, and that you're not worshiping God in that church, you're worshiping Satan. So what we have here is a huge problem. Huge problem. And if we look at what the Vatican's role in this is, and if we can't be honest about who they really are, and I don't think there's any politician in the system that goes there. Now, some may know about it, some may want to go there, but they know. Can you imagine if a big politician came out and actually ran on this platform? First, they'd be ridiculed so bad by the media. The media doesn't even give a conservative Republican a chance. And, do you think they'd give somebody who really speaks the truth like this a chance? No. So the whole thing's based on a premise that's kind of iffy and false anyway. Tony stood up and told the truth about all of it. Told the truth about all these things. And that, to me, was the one reason, the main reason he had to be quieted. He had to be told, and he had to be framed, put in jail. They thought they could shut him up. But what I found is the ministries moving forward, they still get 300,000 hits a week or more. And when we do stories like this, it gains interest. And I find there's so much interest overseas in this story that it ain't even funny. And so I hope that somebody will take this and spread it around, get it into the hands of somebody so that maybe we can get him out of jail. He spent enough time there. And I'm trying to present a case so that you see the other side of the story. Everybody had this guy convicted. They didn't even know why. They just said, well, the media said it, the government said it, so it must be true. And we know, if you take my advice, don't believe a word the media says and don't believe a word your government officials say. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. you will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this July 27th, 2016 day on our calendar. This is part 5, the last segment of part 5 of the series I'm doing on the Tony Alamo Ministry and how Tony was framed for crimes he didn't commit, spending 175 years in jail. Since 2008 he's been there, and let's see if we can get him out. Now, today, last segment of this, because people want to put this together on a YouTube or somewhere and put them all together, send them out so people can listen and maybe get some action on this. Now, go back to some of my other shows at arcticbeacon.com, and there's a whole bunch of things outside of Tony's conviction, illegal conviction I might add, frame job better way to put it. And there's a whole bunch of things going on regarding the children that were kidnapped by the state, and I don't use that term mildly. They were kidnapped. There was no reason for these kids to be taken from their parents. No abuse was ever found, and it was a frame job there as well. Then they're trying to take all their property. So what do you got here in this country now? You know, you say a few things against the establishment, you say a few things against the Vatican, and you're going to end up losing everything? Yeah, that's what it says. And they can back up and say, oh no, he's a child abuser. You know something? It's a bunch of lies. And we're going to say it just the way it is. And I'm sure of it because I've checked this out over the years. And I also want to say there's a lot of weak-minded people out there. I remember when this story first hit, there were a few people who were saying, oh, I believe in the truth, I believe in this. And because these charges seem to paint such a bad picture on Tony, they just didn't bother to even help him. They backed off so fast. And to those guys who you know who you are, I don't know how you can live with yourself, because you're supposed to be innocent till proven guilty, but we know that's not the case in this country, in many cases. some of the biggest crooks we have are leading this country as we speak. And one of the craziest things in the world, you don't think that the Obama, let's go farther than what the Republicans are doing this year. And let me say this is one year where they, Republicans always had this thing, we have to be nice to the Democrats. I don't think being nice to any of them is good. But since we're kind of focusing on Clinton, in a sense, and this, when you look, she's been around for 30 years. And I said, before I get into this stuff, I think this is important. Go to my show regarding who they're protecting, Clinton and Obama, in Pennsylvania. His name's Fethullah Gulen. And you don't think the Turkey situation, that thing that, the coup in Turkey is important. I'm telling you, it is a key. And you don't think they have World War III on their mind? Guess what? America was behind the coup in Turkey. And Erdogan, who's been painted as a Muslim extremist by Obama and his administration, is nothing of the sort. He's a Muslim moderate. And if you know the Middle East at all, Turkey was one of the only countries that had any kind of, semblance of democracy in that extreme Muslim world. And basically, we wanted to bring him down. He found out about it and was within 15 minutes of his life that he got out. He got out because he got wind that we, along with these rebels, were going to try to take over his country. Now, why? Because they wanted to bring extreme Muslim group there. They painted it a different way in the press, but they wanted to bring the caliphate there to Turkey to destabilize more in that region. And that would take away one of our military bases. And it was a plan put in place by the CIA and our leaders. Now, you're hearing that Erdogan's rounding up all these dissidents. They're making him out to be an extremist, when in fact he's rounding up the extremists in the Gulen movement. And Fethullah Gulen, as we talked about in my show with Leo Zagami from Italy, I knew about this movement years ago. I remember talking about it to Leo 7 or 8 years ago when in Norway, and he told me basically this is an extreme Muslim caliphate movement. Now, guess what? That's not the way Gulen's painted out. Go Google him. He's sitting, being protected by our government, and basically he's infiltrating our country with this kind of classroom caliphate. He spreads in his schools and everything else. He is an extremist that we're protecting. Guess what? What Erdogan said is, okay, give me Gulen and we can start repairing our relations. Do you think they're going to give him? No, he still sits in Pennsylvania. There's the real truth behind it. So it goes way to the top. I just wanted to get that out. Go to that show. It's important. So now, let's look at some of the irregularities of this trial. There's so many of them, I could probably go on for 24 hours. But the one thing, after Tony was convicted, they did he changed his lawyer so many times. I still don't think he got a real good one. But anyway, they did file a motion for a new trial. And that sat on a judge's desk for over a year or two. I don't even know if they ever ruled on it. Probably didn't. But he didn't. The motion was rejected in the end. And when you look at these counts, what they were basing it on, you can't believe it. You can't believe that the guy didn't even, judge didn't even bother reading it because they wanted this guy put away. Now, first they started out with saying there was an illegal search warrant. And of course, they had no probable cause to search him. And that can be proven by John Peeler's testimony that they tried to frame him in the beginning. They were trying to plant things there. They couldn't, so they went in there anyway. Now, the court then committed an error by failing to require the government to reveal the identity of the two informants they sent in there. one being Peeler, and then there were probably more than two. And the government didn't have to reveal that. Why? They should have allowed these guys to testify in the defense's behalf. And that would have shown you there was a conspiracy here to bring this guy down. And that wouldn't play good with the jury, though, would it? Now listen to this. The court then erred by refusing to have the government reveal their original notes of interviews with witnesses and further refusing to inspect the notes of the government agents, or at least to order them preserved with the court. So, look, a defense attorney has the right for all of this information. There's no reason. They have to reveal all of this stuff. And the judge said, oh, no, I'm not even going to deal with the motion for a new trial. It sat for a year. Now that judge should have been just taken off the bench. Now, the court committed another error by refusing the defense to see and inspect the records of Wellspring Counseling Center as to government witnesses Colbick, Orlando, and Eddie. Now, the point here is they took these girls. The girls didn't go to the FBI and say, hey, this guy's, worse than Charles Manson. No, they had sought them out. They were looking for people, like Tony even said, there's a lot of people that come through my ministry, and many of them, some with bad intentions. And so it is, with an open door policy, you're going to find people that are disgruntled. Maybe they thought I want to stay here, but he's not letting me. I want to continue to use drugs. I want to do this. He said, I don't want these people around. So what they did is they looked for disgruntled people that they could coerce. They take them to this place called Wellspring Counseling Center, which was basically, in the beginning, the Cult Awareness Network. And they spent weeks basically promising them, coercing them, telling them lies about what other people said about Tony. And if you ever understand when they do investigate, and sometimes they're justified. Look, investigators, detectives have a job to do. And when they're actually looking for somebody who committed a real crime, they're allowed to lie. They can do anything to get the testimony. But when they're trying to make other people lie about this man to get a conviction, that basically is a reason for dismissal if they're FBI agents, if they're prosecutors, or anything else. It's a violation of the ethical codes, and everybody knows it. But that's what was going on. So they take these girls there. They gave them gifts. They promised them things. They tell them all these things that didn't happen at the ministry to get them to lie. And you know what was so interesting? That a number of these girls wrote statements afterwards saying they were sorry what they did. But that didn't matter, because he was in jail already, and we're just going to take this case and forget about it. Just crumble up all the paper, maybe just, get rid, as if it didn't even exist. Now, court also erred by refusing defendant to request to see and inspect FBI witness interviews. And that there's laws that say, yes, the defense is allowed this information. Now, even though the government said they didn't have any to turn over. We know that's a lie, because even some of these girls said afterwards that they were coerced by the FBI. They were told lies by the FBI. And one of the witnesses, Desiree Colbick, who's recanted her statements now, testified that she talked to an FBI agent at least 80 times. So why didn't the judge say to here we have testimony that this witness who's accusing Tony of this, who's also been given bribes, been given money, been given all these kind of things to lie, told lies that she said she, wished she didn't go do this to him. Why didn't the judge allow the defense to see these three, it's called the FBI 302s, which is a legal term of witness interviews? Why? Because it was shown that they were trying to coerce the witnesses, getting them to lie. That's why, but the judge didn't care. Now, the court committed error by denying Defense Rule 29 motion on the sufficiency of the evidence to all counts, as the government failed to prove the elements of the offense alleged in any of these incidents. And that goes to the question the jury asked. Can we convict this guy even if he didn't do it? Judge didn't want to answer that. He said, just follow my instructions. Judge, when a jury comes back, they are required to get a clarification, to clear things up so they know exactly what's talking about. Now, there were 10 counts they found, and in the motion for a new trial, that was never even looked at. Sat on the judge's desk for years. For a year, at least I know. Count 1. And then it was probably just categorically dismissed. Probably didn't even read it. Because his intentions, he knew the trial was such a kangaroo court that if anybody ever read it, they go, well, did you really go to law school? You know, that would be my first question. Sure he did. But you know what? As one of my good friends once said, Sherman Skolnick, they used to call him the Judge Buster in Chicago. And that's an interesting story. Sherman's no longer with us. He passed away around 2008, I believe. He said, the most endangered species in this country is an honest judge. And let me tell you something. In conversations I had with him over the years, he said the higher it goes, the worse it is. Not the better, the worse. So, in count 1, this girl named Summer Hagen, the court, the defense says that she wasn't supposed to go on that trip to California. There were multiple purposes of the trip, including visits to defendants' doctors, installation of a new sound system in the California church, and shopping for and purchasing jewelry and clothing related to church activities, as well as routine church business. Summer Hagen testified she really did not know why she was going, but another girl testified it was their idea to go on the trip, not Tony Alamo's idea. He didn't even have any idea. He didn't coerce her to go anywhere. So I'm going, and then they couldn't prove anything happened. So what is this? Now in count 2, the defense says the evidence is that Tony left California to see his sick brother in Nashville. When he returned to Falk, Hurricane Katrina had caused a chaotic situation in the central United States, and he did not want church members, including his own children, to travel during this time. One of the complaining witnesses called from California and wanted to come home to Falk. Tony resisted because his daughter was with them and other church members. Finally, he relented and gave permission for them to travel home to Falk. There was never any sex alleged to have occurred on this trip. There was no evidence showing that the dominant purpose was for immoral purposes with Hagen. So what's that one about? Now in count 3 and 4, all of the evidence is that Desiree Colbeck's mother visited her freely and on 2 occasions came and got her and took her to the mother's home in Oklahoma. There is no evidence the purpose of the trip was for sex. In fact, Jennifer Colbeck testified as to the real purpose for her daughter's travels, which did not include any kind of sexual activity. And if you go to their website, and I think I've done a show on this, Colbeck has now recanted everything, or most everything. And I've done shows on some of these witnesses who are sorry for what they did, sorry they were coerced, sorry they said these things that were obviously lies. Now, in count 5, Amy Eddy testified she arrived in Falk in January 1999 while Tony was in prison, serving his sentence for a federal tax conviction. Mr. Alamo was not released from prison until July 8, 1988. He stayed in a halfway house until December 98. Amy Eddy's father was concerned that she went to Fort Smith to talk to him over the phone. Her mother, Sue Davis, testified as to the reasons for Amy Eddy's transportation, which did not include sexual activity. Mrs. Davis sent her back to Falk. In count 6, the testimony concerning the 1999 trip to Nashville established that the purpose for the travel was to look into real estate and visit Mr. Alamo's sick brother. Amy Eddy testified she did not have sex with Mr. Alamo on this trip. In addition, Mr. Alamo got permission from his probation officer to travel and set forth the purposes of the travel on the travel request form. So she even testified there wasn't any sex. So I mean, can you, and this is 6 of the 10 counts. Let me see how much time I get. And I got a few minutes here. The rest are just as bad. I mean, in a sense of nothing really happened. They were using this Mann Act as an easy way to get a conviction for someone who didn't commit a crime and was being persecuted for political reasons. That's my take on it. And when you looked at some of these other, when you go to count 7, this concerned a trip to California for a legal matter that was interrupted, and church members spent the night in Albuquerque before returning to Fort Smith. Witness Orlando testified, "I'm not sure about it, but it had to do with legal matters. There was no evidence of any kind of sex on this trip either." Angela Morales testified that she and Orlando stayed in the same room, and Orlando never left. And he sits in jail for 175 years. Man, this is scary. It really is. Because there, and I mean, I've seen talked to some of the, besides this boilerplate motion, which are very, very, how a judge cannot look at this and go, this trial is a sham, and the prosecutor should have been disbarred, is beyond me. So we have in counts 8 and 9, this was a trip from Fort Smith, Arkansas to Huntington, West Virginia for the deposition in West Virginia. Orlando testified that the trip to West Virginia had something to do with his ex-wife. She also testified on cross-examination that she didn't remember if they went from Fort Smith to Memphis. Several witnesses, including Sanford White, Angela Morales, and Sharon Alamo, confirmed that the trip from Fort Smith to Memphis was never occurred, as the group traveled straight from West Virginia to Memphis. There was no evidence of any sex on this trip. Orlando's parents were waiting in Memphis to assist Mr. Alamo in the tax trial. There was also testimony that Orlando shared a room with someone in Huntington and did not leave the room that night. Again, no evidence in count 8 and 9. In count 10, it's the same thing. This count concerned the substitution of office personnel in Falk and in California. Now, witnesses Rodriguez and Orlando were to go to the church in California to take the place of 2 other office workers who wanted to return to Falk. Rodriguez merely asked if she could accompany Orlando because she went to California. There was absolutely no evidence Tony did anything to require Rodriguez to come to California or to return to Falk from California. The testimony was from Rodriguez, needed someone to go with Janine. He asked if I wanted to go with her. There was testimony that church members always travel in pairs, as referenced in the Bible. The evidence of criminal intent is totally lacking by any of these evidence in any of these 10 counts. But yet, he sits in jail for 175 years. Now, I'm not a legal scholar. In fact, I don't even need to have gone to law school to understand that this man was framed. And it started 40 years ago. And that's proven. I mean, I've talked to some of these FBI agents. I've talked to members of this ministry who don't lie. And I know what their intentions are. They work for God. He was a man that put this together so that they could have the time to devote their life to God, but yet work in a very positive manner, doing many things. And it's a good life. The schools were good. They didn't involve drugs or sex or anything. They taught their children Christian principles. What is wrong with that? Well, since we live in an upside-down world here, and you can see that, just turn on the elections and the Democratic and Republican convention. Read your newspapers every day. This is an upside-down world. And again, in the last 2 minutes, the reason they did this was because Tony subscribes, and these people in the ministry subscribe to, you can't just give out 99% of biblical truth. You have to give it all. And that's the real reason the Vatican has been successful in infiltrating most every church in this country. because they do not want to be labeled what they really are. And that is a cult. I'm talking about the Vatican. I'm talking about their intentions throughout the course of history to disrupt governments. And they're doing it as we speak today. They're doing it here. They're doing it in the Middle East. And I'm telling you, all roads lead to Rome. He understood it. He was not going to keep quiet. And he even said the other day, he even said in his little speech, we started this, he's got something on the website called My Commutation. He even said, I'm never going to shut up. I remember one of his interviews, he said the only way they'll ever shut me up is if they kill me, and then they can't do that either because I've gotten so many messages out that are tape recorded and so many pamphlets sent, and in fact many people who still are saying the same thing I am. So they will never shut me up. The only thing they did is they put him in jail where he doesn't belong, and that's what this show's about. And I want you to take all this information. There's ways you can find things on their website at AlamoMinistries.com. You can actually go and read the motion for a new trial, and it was never really. I mean, the judge just said, "No, dismiss it all." You know, he's staying in jail. Simple as that. Political prisoner. That's what he is. And let's see if these shows, again, with many others I've did throughout the years, let's see if it helps a little bit. And read both sides of the story. Make up your own mind. And I think you'll come to the same conclusion to me, that this was a frame job from day one, and it's been going on for 40 years, and that's why he sits in jail. Okay, thanks a lot. We'll be back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. Have a good evening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the left behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.